The general concept of a Speedroid deck is obviously synchro summoning. Basically, a good Speedroid deck with an average draw or better can make at least one synchro summons per turn. With the high quality of level 7 synchros and important level 4 and 5 synchros, Speedroids can compete right out of the box, so to speak. As with most of these deck builds, I start with the direct support. Shave Boomerang is actually a nice tech card for a rank 4 toolbox deck. For you can special summon it with something like Goblinberg, or normal summon it, and then special summon something like Hat Tricker behind it, use its effect to lower the attack of an opponent's monster, then XZ summon Ragna Zero, use Ragna Zero's effect, blow up the monster Boomerang affected, get a quick destruction and a draw. However, in a Speedroid deck, heck, almost any other deck, this card is really bad. Double Yo-Yo is definitely a high quality card in the deck, as 9 out of 10 times you're going to use its effect to special summon Red-Eyed Dice from the graveyard, and then use Dice's effect, if necessary, to go into a synchro play spanning between levels 2 and 7. Double Yo-Yo also makes summoning Trishula incredibly easy if Red-Eyed Dice is in your grave, due to the special summoning ability of both Terror Top and Taketomborg. 3 copies is essential to keep a steady flow of synchro summoning. Menko is the Speedroid spin on Battle Fader. The problem with this card is, outside of its Fader-like effect, it doesn't help Speedroids really advance their condition or position very quickly because it's somewhat slow. It's definitely preferred over Fader for both Speedroids and really for most decks, because the simple fact is it's a level 4 that does what Fader does, but also puts monsters in defense mode, so they're typically easier to kill. This really probably will replace Fader in a lot of decks that want to have an issue of stopping OTKs, because it's just a superior card. But for Speedroid decks, it just doesn't seem to get the job done very effectively. Running 1 may be viable due to Terror Top's searching ability, but for me, this card just doesn't do enough to facilitate victories. Terror Top is Speedroid Stratos. It is almost becoming rather ironic that a number of the newer archetypes all have a Stratos-like card, and yet heroes in the TCG still see Stratos on the ban list. However, again, Stratos supporters, the reason for this is valid because Stratos just doesn't search, but also has the capacity to destroy back row at no cost beyond its summons. I think a lot of Stratos supporters forget that part of the effect. Anyways, returning to Top. This card must be run at 3, for it is the second best card in this archetype so far, as one of the keys to Speedroid is getting the best card, Red-Eyed Dice, into your hand or graveyard as fast as possible. Top accomplishes this task nicely by special summoning itself, searching for Red-Eyed Dice, allowing you to normal summon Dice, and make a strong synchro play between levels 2 and 7 anytime you actually don't have a monster on the field. Ohaja Kid is a bad card due to a single word: immediately. The problem with Kid is that you have to make the synchro summons with the tuner without applying any of the effects associated with the summons. Basically, you cannot activate Red-Eyed Dice's effect when it's summoned with Kid. You must go into a level 4 synchro immediately. Overall, I'm just not a fan of this stringent condition when the effect is tied to a normal summons. If the effect was tied to a summons period, then this card might have some promise, but at this time there's no real reason to run it over another tech card that almost everyone has already latched onto for Speedroids, and largely because of its interaction with another tech card, and it pretty much does the same thing. Taketomborg is a very nice support card for the general theme, for in combination with Top, it significantly increases the speed in which you can grab Red-Eyed Dice from the deck and get to work synchro summoning. The innate special summons effect is critical for this speed, allowing large combination potential with both Double Yo-Yo and Top. Taketomborg is one of those cards that makes Trishula summoning jokingly easy in this deck, because the wind-only summoning restriction is only applied when you tribute Taketomborg. Overall, that wind restriction limit really isn't that restrictive because there are a number of high-quality wind synchro monsters, and thus, really, if you run this card anything less than 3, I think you're simply inviting inefficiency into the deck. Tri-Eyed Dice is not good, for while it has a nice Necrogardna effect, especially because it can be recovered from the banished zone a number of ways, the problem is the lack of versatility it brings to the party as a level 3. You will almost never select Tri-Eyed Dice over Red Eyes when given the option. If this card were level 4, then it would have a meaningful use, not possessed by Red-Eyed Dice. You could use it to bring out level 8 Synchro access. But it's not level 4, it's level 3, thus, as mentioned, just doesn't bring anything interesting or useful to the party. With this deck, OTK rushes are not a big problem, except for periods of bad luck, and also can better be managed by Menko, and typically running this card just to save one monster from one attack somewhere during the duel, it's just not that relevant. Overall, this card is just too slow for my taste, and as mentioned numerous times, it just doesn't bring anything important to the party. Run 3 copies of Red-Eyed Dice, or just stop playing Speedroids right now. Put quite simply, I think Red-Eyed Dice is the best tuner in the game, opening the door to any synchro of level 2 to level 7. Basically, Red-Eyed Dice is the synchro equivalent to the XZ capacity of Ga Magician. While some may be a little annoyed that level 8 synchros are not immediately available, there are more than enough quality monsters within the level 2 through 7 nest to satisfy any Speedroid player. Also, due to the special summoning capacity of Speedroids, it makes level 8 synchro play still rather easily as well if you desire them. They're just not immediately as simple and clean cut as 2 through 7. Kendama is not actually good in my opinion. For anyone who has watched my deck builds in the past, you know that I'm not a fan of piercing, as I just don't see it really as valuable. It's kind of a front-runner effect that, hey, I'm already winning and my probability of victory is already very high, but piercing increases it from like 92% to 93.5%. Yay. Yeah, yay. But what if I'm not winning? Then piercing is worthless. The burn damage is rather pathetic because there really aren't any machine monsters that can be splashed into a Speedroid deck that combo effectively with the deck. Sorry, DD Scout Plane. The final effect is hamstrung by a double restriction where really only one would have sufficed. The only reason to run this card is it's probably the best generic wind level 6 synchro, but thanks to the versatility of Red-Eyed Dice, that strength is almost pointless. I'd stay away from this card. I don't even run any copies, let alone one, because extra deck space can be tight when you have levels 2 through 7 widely available to you. In contrast to Kendama, Chanbarider is a fantastic synchro card that pretty similar to Armades in the context that because it's a generic summons, it's going to be a level 5 synchro staple in a lot of decks. It's a double attacker that increases its attack points by 200 during each damage step that can also scoop a banished Speedroid monster into the hand when destroyed. Yeah, that's definitely worthy of at least 2 extra deck spots. Actually, this card plus limiter removal really is just not fair and complete cheese. Shock Surprise is a great mid-game to late-game card in that it basically is a +1 when you're not using Red-Eyed Dice as kind of the fuel for the card. I run 2 copies to increase draw probability, but make sure I avoid those unnecessary clocking events of drawing it early, because it can be a little annoying when you draw this card early. Speed recovery is important at 3, for it is an advanced version of Call of the Haunted in normal spell form. The remove from play effect is also stellar, as most of the time you're going to get a double yo-yo. You'll add it back to your hand, normal summon the yo-yo, use yo-yo's special summon effect to get a red-eyed, use red eyes on double yo-yo, and set up a big-time synchro summons. Basically, most of the time, speed recovery can just make a synchro monster out of nothing if it's just sitting in your grave. Very powerful card. Anything less than 3, stop running Speedroids right now and go find a different deck. I'm not a fan of Dice Roll Battle because the only Speedroid tuner I run is Red-Eyed, and I want that either in my hand or my graveyard. I do not want it banished. The secondary effect is difficult to depend on due to its inconsistencies surrounding its activation, and it's not very good anyways due to the reality that typically the best monster you'll summon is a level 5 or lower Synchro monster. Finishing up the rest of the non-Speedroid monsters, one of the most obvious monsters for this deck due to Red-Eyed Dice being a wind tuner is Pilica, Descendant of Gusto. While using her effect limits the field to only wind synchros, thankfully, due to the new release of Old Entity Hastorr, this restriction is a little detriment because Hastorr's a pretty nice synchro monster. Speedroids are machines, so obviously for me, if anyone's seen my previous deck builds involving machines, I like running 2 copies of Machina or Machina Fortress. The ability of speed recovery to put a Speedroid back into your hand at only the cost of removing it from play also significantly increases the efficiency of summoning Fortress. Unfortunately, running 3 is just a little too cloggy in my experience with this deck build. Outside of being just a general great card, Fortress also has the additional benefit of being able to dump a Red-Eyed Dice into the graveyard when you have a double Yo-Yo in hand, and you can set up your special summons of Fortress, and then you can normal summon Yo-Yo, special summon Red-Eyed Dice, and go right into some level 2 to 7 Synchro, and make a very strong field. Finally, due to Pilica's presence in the deck, obviously, it is wise to run 3 copies of Emergency Teleport. However, a 1-to-1 ratio of Pilica v Teleport, I don't think that's very efficient, so I like running 1 copy of Recover to use when Red-Eyed Dice is not immediately available, and his innate summons from the graveyard and Recover's innate summons from the graveyard effect can also come in handy because Speedroids move through the extra deck very quickly. So, I'll pay 2,000 life points to get this on the field. No problem. Help advance my Synchro plays even further. Moving on to the non-Speedroid direct spells, I run the 3 most important staples, 1 Raigeki, 1 Book of Moon, and 1 Soul Charge. Because machines make up a vast majority of this deck, 1 copy of Limiter Removal is required. Heck, it'd be required even if they didn't, just because Chanbarider is just ridiculous in combination with Limiter Removal. As I alluded to just briefly, I do run 3 copies of Emergency Teleport to support Pilica and Recover plays to improve Synchro summoning efficiency. Due to the importance of Synchro summoning in this deck, I run 3 copies of Mystic Space Typhoon to ward off any tempo breakers that my opponent can throw at me, like Vanity's Emptiness, or Fiendish Chain, or Mirror Force. Finally, I run 1 copy of 1 for 1 to increase Red-Eyed Dice summoning probability, and 1 copy of Mind Control for monsters or pushing for game. For the traps, I run my 3 general staples, 1 Torrential, 1 Bottomless, 1 Solemn Warning, and I run 2 copies of Breakthrough Skill. For Shock Surprise and the MSTs will commonly be able to handle back row, so having the breakthrough skills is important for managing monster effects. Note that when Solemn Notice comes out, I'll replace the breakthrough skills with those Solemn Notices. Some people might look at this deck build and say, where's Expressroid, or where's Supercharge? Because, Speedroids are Roid monsters, so what about dipping into that old Roid support? Expressroid is a nice tech card, but I don't like it in this particular build because it is too slow, because you're going to use your normal summons to bring out Expressroid, because you really shouldn't be using your special summons to bring out Expressroid, because there are so many better targets to bring out with the special summons. However, if you use that normal summons, what you're adding back to your hand becomes of limited value. You can't use top special summons effect. If you add a tuner back into your hand, the tuner is of limited value. You just used your normal summons, so you can't use double yo-yo. So it's almost like, well, I added some good resources back to my hand, but I have to wait a turn before I can actually really get the ball rolling on utilizing them. The one area where this is a little different is if you run Menko. If you run Menko, then Expressroid's value increases significantly because you can add a Menko and some other Speedroid back to the hand. More than likely, it's either going to be Terror Top or Double Yo-Yo, thereby preventing your opponent from at least ending the duel in the next battle phase, because they could run over your Expressroid and start to push. You bring out Menko, end the battle phase, end it there, and you can start your whatever you want to do next turn. Basically, my feelings on Expressroid is if you're running Menko, then Expressroid has value, and it's worth considering. If you don't, then skip it. Expressroid is pretty much kind of worthless in this deck. There are a lot better options. The problem I have with Supercharge is that it does nothing to stop the opponent's play. The game has significantly increased in speed since Supercharge was first created, where not stopping the opponent's play can put you so far behind the proverbial 8-ball that the 2 drawn cards do little to help. Also, the activation condition is a little suspect. For Speedroid, rarely should be just sitting on the field saying, well, I'm just by myself, please run me over via battle, unless it's a Speedroid Synchro monster. And the probability of a Chanbarider getting destroyed as a result of battle, that's incredibly low if you've been using it properly. Kendama is a little better in combination with this card, but both this card and Kendama, in my opinion, are not good. So their combination brings too much inefficiency, in my opinion, to really be worth it. I guess if you're running 3 copies of Menko, running this card becomes valid because you can add a Menko to your hand and, stop. Then the Menko can stop your opponent's play, but overall, I still wouldn't run it. For the extra deck, I run 1 copy of Trishula, the Dragon of the Ice Barrier. Speedroid decks should basically run as many legal copies of Trishula as they are allowed. 1 copy of Hot Red Dragon Archfiend. 1 copy of Stardust Dragon. Stardust is very nice for this deck because 1, it's wind, and 2, its effect helps you make big synchro plays and not have to worry about that Raigeki or Mirror Force if you're attacking. 1 Yazi, Evil King of the Yang-Zing. 1 Clearwing Synchro Dragon. 1 PSYFrame Lord Zeta. 1 Goyo Guardian. 1 Red Wyvern. 1 Armades, Keeper of the Boundaries. 3 Old Entity Hastorr. And I think the last spot for me is kind of a toss-up between Mistbird Clausolas or Wind-Up Zemaines. I usually go with Mistbird because it tends to be more useful. As you can see, this deck does not run Quasar. Quasar is definitely a possibility for Speedroid, largely due to the power of speed recovery. However, I don't run Quasar for 2 major reasons. 1, I have to sacrifice usually 2 or 3 cards, including my 2 Machina or Machina Fortresses, for the other Quasar enhancing materials, and those fortresses, I really like them. In my experience, they've been a pain in the butt for my opponent most of the time. The second reason, Parent Seahorse dramatically increases the probability of summoning Quasar in this deck, and it's not available in the TCG. So, while summoning Quasar without Parent Seahorse is possible, it can pull away from a more pure Speedroid build, which reduces the overall efficiency and win probability of the deck in my opinion, and it almost begs the question, if you're going to make the deck so Quasar oriented, what you have to do without Parent Seahorse, why don't you just run like a Synchron Quasar build instead? For those who are interested in how this deck would go about summoning Quasar with Parent Seahorse, it just simply requires a basic setup of for one example, is you need a double summons, a Terratop, a double Yo-Yo, or a red-eyed dice, and a speed recovery in hand at any time during the turn. So something would go like at the start of the turn, you special summon top, you search for either Yo-Yo or dice, whichever one you don't have, you normal summon dice, make top a level 6 with dice's effect, make a Yazi, destroy Yazi with its effect, special summon Seahorse through Yazi's effect, use Seahorse's effect 3 times, use Seahorse and one of the tokens to make a Librarian, because Seahorse goes to 4, special summon dice with speed recovery, or you can summon a recover with emergency teleport if you're running this type of a build, make a formula, then use double summons, normal summon Yo-Yo, Synchro level 5, make a Quasar. Overall, if you like Synchro summoning, then Speedroids, it's the deck for you. It's probably the best Synchro base deck out there. I think it's better than Synchrons, and it's definitely better than Resonators. Realistically, Speedroids can definitely be tier 1. They have a fair chance at beating any deck that does not restrict summons from the extra deck. However, there are those decks that do that. That seems to become a trend in deck design now. You have Mega Monarchs and that new Buster Blader archetype that both have means of effectively restricting summoning from the extra deck. These decks are another reason why I like running Machina Fortress over a Quasar build, because when you're facing these decks down with Fortress, it basically becomes the MVM, the most valuable monster, for it can destroy the cards that are restricting your ability to make your plays either by battle, or you can suicide it into something and then use Fortress's I get to destroy a card now effect to remove whatever's obstructing your plays. So then you can make your plays during main phase 2 without that obstruction available. Well, that's my Speedroid deck. Thank you for your attention and your time. I'm out.